the restaurant where my grandmother worked, my mom was working there as well when she met my dad. So there's kind of all these connections to that. My dad just loved my grandma, and he would come back to this restaurant because he thought she was so cool, and then he met her daughter, you know. But my grandma really struggled with a lot of mental health stuff. And so my grandpa felt a lot of times like he had to sort of really kind of keep his thumb on her to keep her sort of centered in the family. And that was initially my take of their relationship, is I would think, wow, he's a little harsh. It wasn't until many years later that I realized the reasons why. And then after he passed away, we really kind of saw some of that come back in her, except now there wasn't someone to, you know, that she had that respect for, that could sort of help to calm her. And so it was an interesting few years until she had passed. My grandma was just a force to be reckoned with in this world. She had energy beyond belief. She had an infectious personality. She would talk to anyone, and I mean anyone. She didn't care who you were, what you were like, if she knew you, didn't know you, if you were like her, not like her, it didn't matter. You were someone to talk to, and she was going to talk to you. So as a kid, we would go and visit my grandma and grandpa, and we'd stay with them for a couple weeks in the summer, and that was always so much fun for me. She was one of those ladies who was up in the dark, and she would be in the kitchen. I would wake up because I would sleep in the living room, and I would wake up and hear her in the kitchen, and she'd already be making pies for the day. She would cook 3 large meals every day. She cooked for their church. They were always doing like sales of peanut brittle and banana bread and different things like this to fundraise. She was that woman you think of when you think of, you know, that homemaker lady who did it all. She did it all. She and my grandpa had separate bedrooms for the entire time I knew them. Okay. He was very much a kind of a hoarder of things, but he was able to contain that to his bedroom. But she liked her room to be a little more clean and orderly, and so her room was it was a place that I enjoyed going and taking a nap in as a kid, and you know, hanging out with her. We would go in there and look at photo albums together, and she would tell me who all the people were, and we would do that every year. I remember I was with her for one of those visits when the brother that she always told me she was closest to passed away. And that was kind of my first reality check that, you know, the people that are close to us, the people that we love, don't stay here forever. And I watched her grieve that. And although she definitely broke down and she cried, she also handled it with a lot of dignity. And I think that was somewhat where I feel like I kind of learned how you handle those kind of situations. I'm a very private griever, and there's good and bad to that. When you don't let people in, they can't necessarily support you in the way that you need. But at the same time, it just feels kind of gross to me when people lose control, I guess would be how I see it. I want to say be tough. You know, this world is hard. It's harsh. And you have to be tough to survive. As a kid, my grandmother was just this bigger than life person. And then after my grandfather passed away, she was still a bigger than life person, but she changed a little bit, and she was still grandma, but it was difficult to see her grieve my grandfather's passing, and some of how she did that was through finding other relationships. And so, she would go to the senior center quite a bit, and she would have these boyfriends, and she lived with a couple of them. And that was a really difficult thing because I had such a love and respect for my grandpa. And so to see her do that was difficult for me because it felt like almost a betrayal. And like I was seeing a side of my grandma that I had never seen before. But that's part of what I was saying, where she didn't have somebody to sort of help her to define the path through this grief. And it sort of came out in ways that were a little shocking to all of us. And it was really difficult for my mom. And she would talk to me about that sometimes. And it was embarrassing to her. Yeah, it was just a lot of sort of almost like meeting this new person. She had muscular dystrophy. Actually, it's called Charcot-Marie Tooth. Depending on which doctor you talk, categorized under the muscular dystrophy umbrella, but it's not really. And she had it really bad. Most, like, I can't remember, I think it's like 8 or 9 of the siblings of her siblings had it. All 3 of her children had it. Several of her siblings' children had it. A lot of their children. There was actually a point where one of the universities in Oklahoma was studying some of our family because of how prolific it was in the line. So my grandmother had that, which there came a point where she could not walk anymore, so she was in a wheelchair. So anytime she would come to my home or anything like that, my husband had to physically pick her up and carry her, and that became really difficult. At her home, my mom was living with her. They shared a home at that point, and my mom would have to do a lot of lifting on her, which physically really became difficult for my mom. And there came a point where my mom said, I can't do this anymore. It's literally killing me. And so the decision was made that my grandma was gonna have to go into a nursing home so that she would have the help that she needed. Several nursing homes she moved around to because, they're not all good. I think we all are aware of that. And so we would visit a lot. My kids have some memories of going and celebrating like her birthday and stuff like that. She was definitely starting to show her age. And I had gone over one day to have lunch with her at where she was living at the nursing home. And I walked in, and it was me and one of my children. And we sat down, and she needed help. So I was, spooning food into her mouth. And she just kept smiling at me, and I said, Grandma, do you know who I am? And she just smiled and she said, no, honey, I don't. And I just remember my heart falling into my stomach. It is such an empty feeling when someone who has played such a pivotal role in your life loses that connection with you and doesn't know you anymore. And you kind of go through, it's like this snowball of emotions where there's this feeling of, well, who am I if we don't share a history anymore? And yet you share the history, but if you don't remember it, who am I? Who's gonna know? And it was sort of my first, I had lost at that point 2 people who I was close to, and it was horrible. My grandfather had passed away, and we had lost an uncle. And those were devastating. This felt different somehow because this person is still there. They're physically sitting right there across from me. But it's like coming to terms with the fact that they're already gone. And it was probably within a month. So she would go through these phases where she might recognize you, and then she wouldn't, and then she would and she wouldn't. And it was probably a month after that day where she told me no. She didn't know who I was, and she really didn't know me anymore after that. She didn't know my mom anymore, or any of us. It was just kind of done at that point. And it was about a month later, and my mom called and said the nursing home just called, and she had been on hospice, and they were saying it was time for us to come. And so we raced over there, and it wasn't someplace I wanted to be, but I wanted to support my mom, and I wanted that chance to know that I had said goodbye. And so we stood there and we prayed and we sang a little bit, and we talked a lot about memories and lots of hugs and kisses and lots of telling her that it was okay to let go. And then she was gone. And it was really weird to see someone that was that big of a personality, that had that much life in them. My whole life, she was just this huge personality. And suddenly, they are no more. And I think in some ways, you never fully deal with it. It's not that you don't deal with it. You don't have a choice but to deal with it. You move on. But you are forever changed. Every time you lose someone, you are forever changed. And in that moment, I felt like my job was just to support my mom. That was her mom. She had lost her mom. And everything was going to be on her shoulders. All the decisions were going to be on her. And, my brother and I were going to be there to support her, but it was really her who was going to make a final decision about how something was going to be done. And I didn't know in that moment how that was really going to be the snowball effect for so many changes within that year. And I wish I had understood better what grief does to people. I wish I had understood better how to support someone who's grieving, and maybe I still don't. And maybe there is no right way. But I wish I had not thought it was something that, okay, you just pick yourself up by your bootstraps and you move on. I wish I had realized that grief can hang with you. And you can put a smile on your face and you can move on, but inside, you're a mess. I wish I had known.